Hi there, and welcome back to another Remnants of Naezith individual level discussion video. Today we're going to be skipping over a couple of levels and taking a look at the gap. And the reason for this is that some of the technique that you learn in the gap is very applicable to the two levels that we're going to be doing afterwards, so it makes a lot more sense to cover this one first. The gap itself is an extremely straightforward level, literally, in that it is only a straight hallway with a roof to grapple on and a giant gap at the end, thematic for the level's name. Crossing over this gap will give you the remnant at the end, and it's a fairly straightforward level to complete. There are several different strategies for both the start and middle of this level. The ending, of course, is just jumping, so there's not much to it. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the different ways you can do both of those. For this video, since this level really only has two different areas to it, the start and the middle, the ending is always just going to be a giant jump over the gap. I feel like it's easiest to start off with just the beginning of the level. So we're going to take a look at three different strategies to use at the start of this level. One's rather easy, one's a little bit more challenging, and one is actually pretty difficult. So to start off, we're going to be taking a look at the easiest start. For these starts, you're going to either hold right, grapple, and jump, or you're going to be holding right, grapple, jump, and dash. And the reason that there's a discrepancy here is that one of the methods of doing this level requires an extra dash. And for this specific start, it's actually easier to have that dash instead of dashing at the start. So either just a regular pull or a dash. And it'll look like this. Of course, if you're dashing, it'll go a little bit faster. You'll fly up to the top, come down, and then your next grapple will be as you're swinging down. Very simple, very straightforward, but still effective. The intermediate starting strat for this level can only really be done with the dash method. And for this one, you're going to start off by holding right, dash, grapple, and jump so that you perform a dash pull to the right. And after it lands, you're going to release the grapple and throw out a second grapple. And what this does is it gives you a little bit more horizontal speed, since a dash pull only gives you the same amount of speed the entire way through. Basically, all of the distance from here to the roof is wasted on gaining speed. But by throwing out a second grapple, this distance from where we are right here to where the grapple point is here and will be vertical, we can actually gain a little bit of horizontal speed with this. It's not much, but on a level especially like this, it's a lot more noticeable. So once our grapple hits, we're going to hold on to it, and then as we're about to pass by it, we release that grapple so that we get a nice giant burst of speed. And then from there, same as always, go flying down, and we'll make sure that our next grapple, the same for all of our methods, the first grapple is going to be a nice long one. For the expert starting strategy for this level, things get a little bit trickier. So to start off, we're going to be holding the exact same inputs as intermediate. That is dash, jump, grapple, and right, so that we perform a dash pull into the roof. And it will look something like this. Now, after this, we're going to release, the same as intermediate, and press grapple again, but this time immediately after we press grapple, we're going to switch directions to left. You see, throw out the grapple, and then switch directions to left. This quick switch is rather tricky to do. Oftentimes you'll accidentally grapple to the left, but given enough practice, it's very doable. Once you are done connecting that grapple and you are holding to the left, you're going to wait until Kara flies up and bonks on the ceiling. And basically, as soon as you touch the ceiling is when you want to jump again. And what this does is makes your pull completely horizontal. And you'll notice that once we're done with this, our X speed is going to be significantly higher than either of the other two methods. The way to get this, the absolute best, is to make sure that when you hit this position, you are as close to your grapple point as possible. So the later you can delay the left turn and still get this outcome, the better. Very tricky to optimize. After this, a few more things that we can do, or one other small adjustment, is instead of just falling down and getting a nice long grapple onto the roof here, we can actually shoot off a couple of short grapples as we're flying to the side here. And these ones I find easiest just to time as 1, 2, and then our nice long grapple. This method is actually doable with both of the other starting strategies, so feel free to implement that as you see fit. Now we're going to move on to some of the strategies for actually gaining speed on this completely horizontal path. So our first method is one that I am dubbing the single grapple method because I can't come up with very clever names. This method revolves around simply jumping and doing a single grapple in between every jump. When played at full speed, it looks a little bit something like this. So let's slow it down and take a look at what's actually happening. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to start every run off with just our dash pull at the start. You'll see that we start off with a nice big swing. Remember that the longer your grapple is, the more speed you will get from swinging on it. And that's the principle behind this strategy. Our goal here is to use our jump to maintain our height at a set level so that we always get a maximum range grapple to swing. We swing down, reset our height, max range grapple, swing down, reset our height, and so on and so forth. It's difficult to get actual perfect grapples with this, and as you'll see with other strategies, there is a fair amount of time wasted, but this is also a pretty simple and effective strategy that also works in a lot of other levels. So you see as we swing down, we jump, throw out another grapple, swing down, jump, throw out another grapple, swing down, and each of these grapples we're releasing as close to vertical as possible. We don't want to hold for any longer because then we'll go flying up and that'll mess up our entire max length grapple thing that we have going on here. And our goal is always just to make sure that we maintain a steady height. Once you get into a rhythm, this actually becomes fairly easy and fairly consistent. So feel free to start off with this one and see how far you can take it. Our second strategy here is one that I dubbed the double grapple method because, again, very clever with names. At full speed, this method looks like this. This is one that you'll see a lot of folks in the top 10, top 15 using because it's a little bit faster than the single grapple method and a lot of people also find it much easier. So what's actually happening here? Start off with our full swing, and the first thing to note that's different between this method and the previous one is that after each swing we're doing two things. One, we are jumping and we're holding jump. We want a max height jump, or as much height as we can get out of each jump. The second is after we press jump, making sure to do this only after jumping and not at the same time, we're going to throw out a grapple. If you accidentally press grapple and jump at the same time, you'll get a pull and you'll have to reset. So we jump, hold that jump, and then we grapple. And it looks something like this. So jump and grapple. Keeping in mind that we are holding jump the whole time that we're holding grapple because we want to make sure that by the time this grapple connects, we've gained as much height as possible. The reason that we're doing this is in our previous method, all of the time that we spent jumping was not gaining us any speed. It was just setting up our height so that we would gain some more speed by getting a max length grapple. With this one, we can get a lot of height while setting up our grapple much faster, and then use that height on a second grapple later on. So you see that this grapple is not max range, it's not giving us a whole bunch of speed, but once we release this one and throw out our second one, this is a nice big grapple, and this is where the speed comes from. Big jump, throw out a grapple, fall, and max length grapple. The second grapple in that double is where all of the speed comes from, but the first one is just extra free speed that we can gain while we're trying to get height with our jump. Our third strategy actually does have a clever name, mostly because I didn't come up with it, and that is the rocket method. At full speed, it looks something like this. You can see it gets its name from that giant burst of speed that you get at the end. Admittedly, I'm not particularly good at this method. Chesda and Rock Candy both use this in their PBs, so if you want a very good reference, you can always go in game and watch what they do, but I can still break down mostly what's happening here. So it starts off the same as every other method. We want that nice long grapple at the start. And similar to the double grapple method, we're going to be doing a full jump followed by a grapple. We want as much height as we can on here. And the idea behind this method is that we're going to use the first half of this stage to build up as much height as we can, and then the second half to just fall from that height and gain a whole bunch of speed. Remember, grapple transfers vertical into horizontal velocity, so if we can spend some time building up vertical velocity and then transfer it, it's more effective than just going for horizontal as much as possible. That said, we have our full jump into a grapple. After we release this, we're going to do the same thing again. Full jump into a grapple and release this. Now at this point, we're fairly high up, and ideally we would want to do a jump to up to about here with another grapple. But at this point, it gets really difficult to time the releases of your grapples, which is part of why I'm not super strong at this method. But as close as you can get to the ceiling, the better. So we do another jump to grab onto the ceiling, and then we start falling. As we fall, we're going to throw out a couple of grapples just to amp up our speed a little bit, get us closer to the end, and our goal is to grapple at the very end as close to this as possible and as long of a grapple as possible. As I said, I'm not super good at this, so I missed a little bit, but the idea still stands. Got that nice big grapple, giant burst of speed, and we come flying out at the end. Our final method is my personal favorite, and it's called the staircase method because it involves a piece of tech that is called, well, what I call the staircase climb. At full speed, it looks like this. A little bit different from all the others because you can see we use a dash during the actual grappling portion instead of just saving our dashes for the end, and that is for a very specific reason, so let's go through it now. Starting off the exact same as before, getting into a nice big grapple, and the key thing to note about this strategy is that this grapple can actually be significantly longer because we're going to be using a dash jump here to reach our second grapple. So that means that instead of having to manage this grapple length to get height that is perfect for just a regular jump to reach the roof, now because we have the extra height from a dash jump, we can just go for as long as possible, as close to the water as we possibly can. That being said, we move into a dash as we're releasing this grapple, and then we're going to be jumping and grappling the roof again. So we dashed, we jump, and as we're jumping, we grab the roof, keeping in mind that this is a full held jump because we want as much height as possible. We're basically following the same idea as the previous strategy, the rocket, in that we want to gain as much height as we can early on so that we can use that to gain speed horizontally at the end, except this time we're gaining height much quicker because we're using a dash to boost our vertical position. So we grab on here, and as our dash fades out, we're actually going to release this grapple, and using that dash as it's still going, just the very end portion of it, we're going to jump again. And because our dash is still going on for just that little extra bit of space, we're going to get a dash jump out of it. This dash jump is where the money is. This final dash jump gives us that extra little bit of oomph to get our height all the way up as close to the roof as possible so that we can gain as much speed as possible at the end. Also good to note is that because we're using this dash, we can actually make it closer to the end much more often. So our last grapple will be a little bit farther on, and we'll know that we've gained as much speed as possible. So as our dash goes, we jump, and then we're going to throw it a grapple. This is where our descent starts. Now obviously this wasn't perfect. I could have gone much higher up and then started grappling, but I'm not always perfect. So as we're falling, we're going to throw out those same few grapples just to gain some extra speed before our final grapple at the very end. And you notice that we're actually really far from the end, and that means that we can use this time to throw in one extra full jump into a max length grapple as close to the ending spot as possible. Nice big hop, final grapple, just for a little bit of extra speed. We do only have one dash at the end here, but this strategy gains you speed early on, which compensates for the lack of speed from an extra dash at the end. If you want a good reference for that, my run or Midge's run both use this strategy. Midge's obviously a little bit cleaner than mine, but those are two very good ways to take a look at this strategy. That will be it for the gap. Thanks for hanging out. If you have any questions, comments, you want to call me a name, something like that, throw a comment down below, and we'll see you next time.